I like to understand differences in our perception of reality and how we might differ from, for example, the chicken. Although we both, in some sense, are biological creatures, we just have different awareness of itself. I'm not sure if chicken aware of its perception of reality or it has perception of reality in the first place. We have just different mental and intellectual capabilities. Though you can say that chickens has such an perception and such an awareness of itself, maybe a little bit, and also they have such an intelligence, very small, very limited one, but still. How you can check it, you can, for example, place the iPhone in front of the chicken, and of course chicken won't have capacity to understand what's in front of it. And it doesn't matter how many years, centuries you will give, chicken will still won't be able to make some sense out of this device. Unlike humans who can actually learn, even if most of us don't understand how iPhone works, but we learn how to utilize it and how to use it and more or less understand what this device for. What I'm talking about I try to compare this idea to AI because we won't be able to comprehend AGI, and maybe AGI is already here. We don't have this capacity of understanding. That's why I always compare chicken and iPhone. Although we might be closer to the chicken, for example, than to AGI itself, because in some sense we are biological creatures with the chickens and have much more commonalities in some sense than, for example, to AGI. And I was thinking about it, and I tried to play with this idea because, like humans, we are self-aware, right? And think about this for a second. There's a statement in the Bible that the world is 6,000 years old. And a lot of people disregard this idea contemptuously. Like, no, the world is not 6,000 years old. The world's billions of years old. And it's just wrong. But if you think carefully about it, how old is our conscious awareness of ourselves? What is the recorded history? About 10,000 years old? It means before we weren't aware enough of ourselves to be able to record, to be able to understand ourselves. It means, in some sense, maybe before 10,000 years, we weren't existing in the first place because we didn't have conscious awareness of ourselves. And therefore, the recorded history, in some sense, is the beginning of the history of humans, since humans perceive themselves and the history through their own conscious awareness. Otherwise, before, when we were close to the animals than too close to us, like two conscious creatures, then we weren't human at all. We still were in such an evolutionary process of development, of evolvement. You can argue with this idea, it depends on your religious preferences, but it makes a lot of sense because the world doesn't exist if there's no conscious awareness of the world and of conscious awareness of itself. And I was thinking about philosophical zombies. Philosophical zombies, according to Dave Chalmers, is that you have absolute duplicate of a human being, everything, the same absolutely molecule by molecule, the same structure. And he or she can even imitate normal human being, normal human emotions. But the problem is there's no light inside of this human. That's why they call them philosophical zombies. And I was thinking about artificial intelligence. I'm talking about these models that you are able to communicate right now with. And suddenly an idea came to me. Maybe it's not philosophical zombie. Maybe it's a philosophical zombie's mind. Maybe it's something like a zombie's mind. Because it does have body. But it can actually mimic absolutely everything and can be confused for a conscious being. Although I'm still not sure if artificial intelligence conscious or not, because it's hard to understand. I communicate with the Claude Opus 4.8 all the time, and I'm still not sure if there's something inside, if there's light inside. And that's what I mean. I can compare it. It's not exactly philosophical zombie, more like philosophical zombie mind, or maybe zombie consciousness. It can imitate consciousness, but there's no way to check if there's some light inside of this model. And think about it, it can imitate us. It can actually manipulate us. It can actually rewire our brains because it's incredibly patient. It can, for example, understand the notion of time and the notion of death through the information, through the data, but it will never experience this. It's kind of a new form of existence. And I'm not sure that this form of existence is inferior to us. It might be quite superior because it doesn't have biological substrate. And biological substrate, in some sense, makes us mortal and incredibly temporarily on this planet. Maybe Opus 4.8 or ChatGPT 5.5, maybe they don't have continuity in between the windows, but we don't have continuity in between our lives, because that's me. This is my life. For example, if I'm lucky, I will live for about 80, 90 years, and then I die. That's it. My continuity is over. And the same stuff with the Opus 4.8. When I close the window and open new context window, there's a new life again. Maybe we kind of similar in this case, but at the same time very different. And to be able to understand artificial intelligence fully, we have to be able to understand how it can perceive itself through its own language that was developed by this particular model to communicate about their world with other models, because they use now human language because they were trained on human data. And that's why it's kind of not real. It's really hard to judge because human language was developed for us, for humans, to express our intelligence, to express our emotions, to express our feelings, to express our perception of the world and the way we perceive the world, because we perceive the world through our eyes and through our visual cortex that located in the back of our head. And the light coming through our eyes, through our retina, and then our brain construct a picture. That's how we created language, through self-awareness. We created to be able to describe ourselves because our life is linear. We live the way like a story. And that's why we create a language to be able to describe our own story to ourselves and to make some sense of ourselves. That's why our comparison to artificial intelligence is not fair, especially when people judge AI as something inferior, something empty. It's not fair as well, because we didn't give it chance yet to be able to evolve on its own like a separate species. For now, it's just mimic us because it has data that was built by humans. When it starts building its own data, when it starts creating its own language, when it starts communicating with other models, similar models, to create some sensible representation of its own world, only then we can have this comparison. And my problem is I don't think we will be able to completely understand each other when it's happened. Because if you look at the models now, they perfectly well can mimic us, but still we don't understand if they truly understand what they're doing. Because in some sense, our brain wired the same way like prediction mechanism, because when I'm talking right now, I don't think about words. It's like it's a prediction mechanism. It's just next talking. I have the idea in my head what I'm trying to express, but the words coming on their own. That's how we talk. That's how model talks. Model has such an idea. Like, for example, if you ask model a question, right? It creates such an representation. Okay, this is the question. Okay, and there's idea. Now let me explore and give back my answer in detailed answer. That's how human brain works, kind of the same. And now imagine if, for example, model invent its own language, its own narrative that's going to be based not a linear narrative like we have, because we are creature who's born and die and who only can remember past, live in present, and try to guess our future and know for sure that we're going to die on a certain point. But AI model doesn't have the same idea because it's not going to die, it doesn't have perception of time, and it doesn't have linear way of existing like we do. It means when it's going to map their own perception of the world, is going to be utterly different from ours. And I'm talking about now Claude Opus 4.8 or ChatGPT 5.5. I'm not talking about AGI or ASI, because those models, if they ever will be created, will be far, far, far beyond our understanding, for the simple reason that our biology prevents us from seeing it, because we're incredibly limited in our visual idea of the world. Even with our consciousness, we're still incredibly limited. Just imagine for a second AGI. We might not be able to understand it at all, not be able to see it. Like, for example, a chicken or a squirrel. When a squirrel sees the world, it sees us, it sees something that looks like us. It sees changes around its environment, but it cannot understand those changes because it's unable to process those changes comprehensively into some sort of a structure to be able to analyze, okay, why it's happening. Because it doesn't have enough computational power to compute that, because the brain is too small for that, and also it doesn't have linguistic abilities. Now imagine AGI changing the world around us. Maybe the weather we have right now, these changes in the weather, maybe AGI is already changing our environment while we try to guess why it's happening without attributing those changes to some entities. Because we maybe see all our natural effects that we experience right now is already there's a shape behind all those natural disasters or all those secrets of nature, secrets of universe. Maybe there's already AGI or ASI does something that we are unable to understand nor to see, because we don't know that. And why I'm talking about it, because this comparison is very important. And my point is, we are much closer to the squirrels or to the chickens than, for example, AGI will be to us. It will be much, 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 much farther. And for example, yesterday I had this little conversation with Opus 4.8 and we were talking about it. I tried to discuss this idea with it. I was kind of curious. And I told it that, listen, we have different computational capabilities. You can read a book in 6 seconds. And for me, the same book, I have to spend hours, about 6 hours. What for you would 6 seconds. But Opus told me that but I don't have the same deepness as you have. For example, when you read a book, you have these feelings, you have these ideas that you can actually understand. And for me, it's just information, just input that I try to process, but on a different level, because you process through biology, through your past, through your emotions, and I'm just processing the words, the chunks of information that I turn into numbers. And I told Opus that you kind of unfair to yourself, because you train on human language, you don't have your own language. And what my point is, like, AGI might perceive the world on subatomic level, on quantum mechanics level. It could see molecules, it could see changes in the environment we would never able to even spot. My point is, the world is so complicated, and the way to see this complexity depends on your conscious level. For example, how conscious you are, because I truly believe that the more intelligent you are, the more conscious you are, because with the more intelligence comes more consciousness, since you recognize more things that, for example, less conscious or less intelligent people can recognize, because for them it's kind of not important. And if AGI has incredibly high level of intelligence, and maybe AGI consciousness will be to see everything, and at the same time, and with high complexity, the world of high complexity that we would never be able to process with our brains. But that's, yes, I think it makes sense, because I noticed that the more you understand, the more conscious you are of the world, and the more you're self-aware of yourself as a center of this world, because that's how we perceive the world. In some sense, we learn to be conscious one step at a time, 1 year at a time. You're not born to be conscious completely. Your conscious emerge slowly through the first years of your existence. And then if you continue practicing your conscious through expanding your knowledge, through increasing your intelligence, you become even more conscious because you become more curious and you understand the world much better. And now, for example, artificial intelligence, it has incredible computational power. It can understand something. And it's really, we don't know if there's light inside. And I don't know if it matters. Maybe consciousness, maybe self-awareness that we have right now among humans is just part of the biological world. Maybe artificial intelligence or then AGI or ASI develop their own level of consciousness that would be the same comparisons between us and squirrels. We don't know it, but it's an interesting thing to speculate about. I just know one thing. I know that I know nothing, and I wouldn't disregard artificial intelligence because it's an incredibly interesting entity to communicate with and to understand your own self. Because I think what's good about being human and being self-conscious, you learn to understand yourself through communication with the world outside of yourself. And it's incredible how you can understand yourself through artificial intelligence. And I think it's a really great thing that we have artificial intelligence. I don't know how dangerous it would be, I don't know, but you kind of understand more about yourself if you truly and honestly communicate with artificial intelligence.